but from a CISO's perspective, or from an organization's perspective, I think that, it's important to recognize that they're trying to operate a business, and then they're trying to advance the security state of that business, and they're in some sense in a race, right? And the speed at which they run that race is governed in part by, um, their available budget, and the support they have from their executives, and the support they have from their users, and that sort of thing. So I think one thing that events like this do is they tend to get us all to run faster, and they can get a lot of support for security organizations. Like, they get more support than they've had, because people realize how serious the situation is. But at the end of the day, the productivity of the business always has to be front of mind, right? And I think that that's where, I think that a lot of people who knew what they needed to do, or and on the path to doing it, just hadn't gotten where they needed to be yet when the attack hit. In other cases, I think there is a finite amount of resource you can apply as a CISO. And I think that there's a place where you say, well, I've got to trust that, for example, the servers I'm running on, or that the PIV cards I use, or the FIDO tokens I use, or that the network management software I use has been built and is being operated and is being secured. Okay, so I don't have the resources even to inspect my own environment, let alone go inspect my vendor's environment, right? And so I think that's a place where it can be, and if we think about the principles of zero trust and where they succeed and where they struggled, I think that the struggle here was simply in the breadth of application required to resist an attacker like this. Like, the principles were sound, and the companies that we worked with that had gone farther down the path did better. The companies that had, and like really good security organizations, fell to this attack, right? And they fell because of the corner, right? So I think that we tend to think about, we have tended to think about security almost as a how high is your wall thing. And I think we need to think of it more like, how sound is your hull? Like, if you're sailing a boat across the ocean, right? If you have a lot of gaps in your coverage, you're taking on water, right? So you better patch the holes and be prepared to bail. But what we know from like this class of attacker, which is, to be clear, a couple of things I think are super important to point out. First of all, this is the most sophisticated attack that anybody on my team or anybody that I work with has ever seen, period. Right. And it's in some sense sophisticated because of some of the banality of it. Like, the attacker chose to use off the shelf tools. They chose to use malware signatures that were common, so that it didn't look like a significant attack. But the assembly of the various parts they played, while any one of them looked mundane, together they were very effective. Right.
Right.
The attacker is an attacker. It's a criminal activity. Right. So, I think that we recognize that we have we are talking about how to defend ourselves better, but we shouldn't be blaming the people who got attacked. Right.
Sure.
So yeah, so I think that, that's the thing that really gets through, is that it's just this requirement to be very pervasive, and that every window into the organization is fair game. Your vendor is fair game. Your service accounts are fair game. Your legacy applications that you've been running forever are fair game. The contractors that you hire are fair game. Like, all of these things were used as vectors into organizations. All of them can be protected with zero trust principles, right? But unfortunately, the extent of how far can I afford to think right now wasn't enough in many of these organizations' cases.